You're getting exactly to where I want to go. So before we consider some of your positive arguments in favor, not just of the existence of extraterrestrial life, but that it might be much closer than is commonly held in the mainstream narratives, I'm hoping we can first discuss, and this is where I say you're already getting to where I want to go, the more general Fermi paradox and how other physicists and astrophysicists might explain why it is not, in fact, a paradox. So the idea, as you know, but maybe our listeners don't, is roughly that we have significant grounds, and you've alluded to some of them, for believing that there is other life out there, perhaps abundant life, but at the same time, it's not generally accepted that we have evidence for that life. And so why do your colleagues, though, think that this is? And maybe this is a good time also to mention the Drake equation as well.
Yeah, so I think the fundamental thing to recognize, which many people miss, is that time is measured in billions of years in the context of the universe. And we as a species, Homo sapiens, started only a few million years ago. So that's just 1 part in 10,000 of the age of the universe. That's when Homo sapiens started. The recorded human history is only 5,000 years old, okay? So that's another factor of 100 shorter, okay? So now we're talking about 1 part in a million of the age of the universe recorded human history. And moreover, the region that we usually survey is the Earth or the vicinity of Earth, which, as I said before, it's a quadrillion times smaller region than the extent of the universe. Okay, so imagine you're looking at a region that is a quadrillion of the system that you're talking about. And what that implies is that human experience is very limited. Okay? And if Enrico Fermi sat at lunch with colleagues in Los Alamos in a given year and said, "Where is everybody?" That again is very presumptuous to make a statement about the state of the universe at large, because during that year the chance of the region in space around him being visited by something that would indicate the existence of extraterrestrial life is really small. He didn't develop a telescope like pulsars to even look at the region around the sun where objects might come into from outside the solar system. He just asked, "Where is everybody?" And it's just like someone sitting at home in the living room and saying, "I don't have any neighbors because I don't see anyone next to me," and obviously, you have to look through your windows, and you better even step out to your backyard and check if you have any objects that came from the neighbor's yard. Like maybe a tennis ball that was thrown by a neighbor. Just insisting that you have no neighbors without searching for neighbors is not the scientific method. It's a prejudice. Okay, and my point is that Fermi's paradox may be just a reflection of the limited time and space that we have surveyed. And moreover, the methods that we used, because we were looking, for example, for 70 years for radio signals, okay? And this is a very primitive technology for communication that we are actually not using as much as we did decades ago. Now we have fiber optics, transmitting signals and other means. And it's not at all clear that you would find another civilization exactly the same phase that we are at the time that you're listening, because it's just like waiting for a phone call, okay? You can wait for a phone call at home, and if nobody is calling you at the time that you're waiting for it, just 1 century or so, you will not hear a phone call. But there is a better method, which is to go out and check your mailbox or check your backyard. And that's a completely different method because the sender may not be alive. If you just look at the solar system, the Earth existed for 4.6 billion years since the solar system was formed. And we have, life formed very early on Earth, but it's about to be extinguished within 1 billion years. We just have 20% left. because we know how the sun will evolve, and it will burn up, boil off all the oceans on Earth within 1 billion years. It will get hotter as a result of a greenhouse effect. So irrespective of whether we deal with global warming or not, the sun will basically eliminate the prospects for life as we know it on the surface of Earth. So now you say, okay, that's the sun. But when you look at other sun-like stars, they formed billions of years before the sun. So if there was another planet like us next to them, like ours, and another civilization like us on that planet, by now the star boiled off all liquid water on the surface, and they cannot be there anymore. They perished if they stayed on that planet. And of course, there were probably cries for help. When that was the biggest news item in all the media. Our star is about to kill us. What do? We have to go. There might have been an exodus of the wealthy people boarding spacecraft, leaving the planet to elsewhere, and so forth. And a lot of creatures may have died as a result of not being on those spacecraft. And we didn't hear those cries for help because we were not around most of the billions of years that elapsed. So most of the senders of any equipment, any spacecraft, most of those are dead by now because most stars form billions of years before the sun. If we just make an analogy with the solar system and assume the same replica elsewhere. So my point is that if you are trying to listen to radio signals, you will not hear them because those technological civilizations are not around anymore. It's only those that formed roughly around the same time as we did, that have roughly the same technological phase. And getting synchronized within 1 century, which is pretty much the time since we started transmitting radio signals, getting synchronized to that level within billions of years is really a small probability. Okay, a small chance, a small window of opportunity for us to listen to someone exactly at the same phase of our technological development. So I would say it's much better to search for objects that they send, for packages in our mailbox that would outlast the senders. And that's what I'm doing. Okay, that was not done before the last 5 years, before we detected interstellar objects. And of course, the idea was mentioned here and there, but it was not pursued. So I'm suggesting that we engage in this search. And the reason is that the first 3 interstellar objects out of 4 appeared anomalous. They didn't look like objects that we found before in the solar system. The 4th one did look familiar. It looked like a comet. So the 4th one was discovered by an amateur astronomer, Gennady Borisov. It's called Borisov, and was discovered in 2019. Looked just like a comet with small variants. That looks familiar. It's an icy rock, just like the icy rocks we had in the solar system, came from interstellar space. But the first 3 that we can talk about, these were 2 meteors that I discovered with my student, Amir Siraj. One from 2014, January 2014, the other one from March 2017. Both of them roughly a meter in size. So, comparable to the size of a giant watermelon. And the 3rd one was Oumuamua that we already mentioned. And all 3 were anomalous, and we can talk about why they looked different.
Mm-hmm. Well, first, this is just totally tangential, but hearing that Earth only has 20% of its lifetime left makes it sound so much more pressing and scary than it's ever sounded to me before, despite, the magnitude of that period relative to human timescales. It just seems like a much bigger existential threat. But yeah, I would really like to talk now about checking our mailbox, or searching our mailbox, to use your phrase. And in particular, maybe we could start with Oumuamua. And maybe, specifically, starting with, you mentioned that it was discovered in October 2017, but I'd like to talk about particularly what happened on October 19th, 2017, and then the subsequent 11 days in which we were able to amass evidence.
Right. I should just supplement what you said about the window of opportunity we have left, that it may shrink by a factor of 1,000,000 if we don't avoid a technological catastrophe, because, the biggest risk in my mind right now is, of course, artificial intelligence, in the form of GPT-N, where N is bigger than 4, and if those systems will be smarter than us and could potentially cause a lot of damage if we allow them to control society. And that could happen on centuries timescale. And of course, there are other existential risks of, a much more aggressive pandemic than the one we had, leaking from a lab. We don't know if this one leaked from a lab because it's a political issue. Once again, we are not staring at the evidence. We are just politicizing almost every issue. And of course, in this context, it's important to know whether it leaked from a lab because we want to prevent it from happening again. So once again, adapting to reality has a great benefit, but it's often masked by prejudice or a political agenda. And the other, of course, possibility is nuclear war or some other major catastrophe that we inflict on ourselves. So we have to be wary of these things before the sun will. But the sun will eventually, that's like an inevitable outcome. It's just like being at a certain distance from a furnace, and the heat of the furnace is destined to go up. There is no way out of that. That's natural evolution of the sun. So we can't avoid that. We just need to increase our distance as the furnace gets hotter.